You living up to your full potential? If not, why aren't you? Odds are you have unknowingly developed habits that are actually holding you back. In today's interview, I interview someone. Did you do that on purpose?
It'll make me look less dumb if I say yes.
Yes. Today's interview, I interview someone who I interview. In today's interview, I talk with. Oh, okay. Are you living up to your full potential? If not, why aren't you? Well, odds are you have unknowingly developed habits that are actually holding you back. In today's interview, I talk with someone who has learned how to recognize, confront, and overcome these damaging habits.
Welcome to the World Changer Show with Matt McWilliams. I'm your host, Mark Sieverkrop, a world changer just like you and Matt. On each show, we're going to bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unleash the world changer inside of you and live with passion, lead with purpose, and leave a legacy. Thanks for joining us today. Now let's get started. I worry every time your cursor goes somewhere.
How do you know my cursor goes anywhere?
It shows up.
It does? Oh.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the World Changer Show. This is episode 92. And like we always say, you can find the links to everything we talk about today, including the unedited video cast of the interview on the show notes page at mattmcwilliams.com/092. And before we get into the interview, I want to let you know that if, as you're listening to this interview, you find something you really like, pull out your smartphone and text adventure to 33444. Again, that's adventure to 33444. And that will enter you to win a free copy of the book that Matt and our guests talk about today. Are you ready to go, Matt?
Oh, let's do it, man. All
right. Today's guest has been named the happiness guru and top... What?
That makes no sense.
I think I deleted the wrong thing out of it. All right, hold on a second here.
How about this?
I got it.
Here we go.
Well, I don't think she's been named the happiness guru. I think that's the place that gave her whatever. No, I think that's the name of like the blog, if I remember right.
How about?
So I'm just gonna take it out. Just take it out.
How about that?
The guess is a top one. No, because she was named that by Mind Body Green.
Oh, okay.
You just let go. Quit touching.
This folks is definitely an unedited video here, as you get to watch Mark and I go back and forth about how to read a person's bio. Oh,
there we go. Okay, now we're going. All right, now we're cooking with peanut oil.
What?
You ever watch Duck Dynasty?
No.
That's what Phil says. Things are going well. Now we're cooking with peanut oil. All right.
Wow.
Note, 2 minutes.
Yeah. Last episode it took me 3 minutes.
I know we're getting closer to the beginning.
Yeah. Actually,
right.
I messed up at the beginning, but that was only because you messed up the beginning. So who does that go against? I think it goes against you.
All right. This guy. All right.
Yeah.
Today's guest is named one of the top 100 women to watch in wellness by Mind Body Green and labeled a modern thought leader on the rise by Cafe Truth. She is an inspirational author, speaker, travel writer, and life coach who left her successful career in advertising to follow her heart and be a writer and the best-selling author of Find Your Happy Daily Mantras, and the new book, Adventures for Your Soul, 21 Ways to Transform Your Habits and Reach Your Full Potential. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy this interview with Shannon Kaiser.
All right, and we're live. All right, well, welcome to the show, Shannon.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. I'm awesome, and I'm excited to talk about this book that we have. It's called, I'm going to reach for it here, for those who are on video. And if you're not, I am so sorry, but it's called Adventures for Your Soul. And I have, as I make it a practice, I generally try not to read an entire book when I'm going to interview somebody, because I think it takes away from the kind of the curiosity factor, because it basically becomes that. So on page 7, you say this, and well, can you tell us more about that? And yeah, I know what you're going to say because I already know the answer because I read page 8. And but I did flip through it, and it seems awesome. And actually, it's one of the I'll say many books, but not all of them, that I'm actually personally excited to read after. Like I'm not just going to read it for the interview. So I want to start. Interestingly, it's kind of at the beginning of the book, but I want you to take us to that moment years ago, Shannon, before you were teaching about happiness, before you had, and I don't think any of us have ever made it in life, so to speak, but before you made it to this point, you write that you were depressed, addicted, lifeless in your own words.
Yes.
What led to that time of your life? And more importantly, what got you out of it?
Yeah, we'll flash backwards. It was actually just about 6 years ago. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was in advertising, working in Chicago, and it looked like I had it all together. I was making lots of money. I was with a man who wanted to marry me and getting promotions. On the outside, I was like checking off the boxes, but on the inside, it was a completely different story. I was filled with fear. I would cry myself to sleep every single night. And I went to my doctor, and my doctor diagnosed me with clinical depression. And what I realize now is that, yes, the outward world was trying to say, this is what we're going to diagnose you with. But I mean, what I'm really coming to terms with now is the depression was really me and avoiding my true calling. And so it was a lack of listening to my inner guide. And in that moment, I actually realized I was going to the pharmacy. So my doctor gave me the prescription. And I took the pharmacy note and I said, finally, there's hope. There's something wrong with me that's fixable, as I was walking. And as I tried to open the pharmacy door, as I talk about in the introduction of the book, it was like this force field that kept me from going in. And what I realized is that that was a moment where my inner guide, my higher power, everything just said, Shannon, you don't need drugs to feel better. You can do this. Follow your heart. And so I took that prescription, and it was a very significant moment in my life because I said, okay, wow, I haven't asked myself what my heart wants. See, I thought I wanted to be in advertising, and I was just going through the motions. But through that point, I kind of forgot what was really important to me. And so I left corporate. I moved back to Oregon. I adopted a beautiful dog, and I opened up to the possibilities of what I love, which is writing, traveling, sharing my experiences with others. And this is Adventures for Your Soul, is my 3rd book, and it's a journey and a true joy to be able to do what I love for a living now and share and help others find their purpose and their happiness.
So one thing that I got when I hear you say that, that just kind of came to me is, some people would think that you're holding in your hand the magic pill. I mean, technically you didn't have the pill yet, but you had the prescription for the pill. And this is like, I don't want to get up. I'm not going to get on a soapbox and talk about, the antidepressants and all those things. But, many people might think, okay, this is the answer. All I need to do is take this pill. And, your voice, your conscience said, no, that's not it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like what was going through your mind? I mean, like, I know that, did you feel like before that invisible force field hit you, did you feel like that was going to be the answer to life's problems, or were you already starting to get some of those gnawings that said there's more to it than this?
Yeah, well, I felt lost, and I felt, depression is a very isolating place. And even if it doesn't matter what range of depression filled, whether you're on the suicidal kind of thought range or just like, I hate my job and I don't want to go to work today, there's different layers, and we cycle in and out all the time. And I think the key thing is to really be aware and start asking yourself the questions while you're in it. And so for me, I started to say, there's got to be more to this, but what if there's not? And that was a really desperate place for me. I was like, is this all there is to life? But then I started to wake up to, well, maybe there is help. So I reached out to my doctor, and my doctor, diagnosed me. And then when I had the prescription in hand, I thought, this is it. This is the answer. But surprisingly enough, I wasn't able to physically go into the pharmacy because there was this force bigger than me, much bigger, the universe, my higher power, my inner guide saying, no, this is not your path. Now, this is not to say that antidepressants, they have a very, very important place in a lot of people's lives. Everyone has their own healing journey. But for me, my inner guide said, there's a better way here. just pay attention. And so that's the key thing, is I started to pay attention before I just numbed those feelings, because I was at a place where I was addicted to drugs already. I was suffering from eating disorders, and I was totally in fear all the time. So it was about shifting those small fear-based thoughts into more loving presence. The addictions dropped. I moved away from the toxic relationships, the city that I didn't belong in. I started removing what didn't serve me. And in removing what doesn't work for us, we start to open up and become a catalyst for what can work.
Yeah, I just looked behind me on one of our bookshelves to see if it was where I thought it might be, and it's not, because I just realized I left it upstairs. But the book, the War of Art, by Stephen Pressfield, and he tells a story, and I don't know how much of this is apocryphal or if it's literally 100% true, but he tells a story of one of the most, clearly one of the most significant figures of the past, like 20,000 years, and that's Adolf Hitler. And he tells a story how he went to, I think it was the Vienna School of Art, and he felt this calling to be an artist, but something held him back. And then, rather than fight through that force, the resistance, as Pressfield calls it, and pursue his calling and do what he felt like he was called to do, he just kind of gave up on it. And Pressfield said, went so far as to say that if Hitler had just painted his first picture, would World War II, would the Holocaust have ever happened? And it's kind of a scary thought to think, well, one dude messed up and didn't do what he was called to do, and we had all this death and destruction. Like, somebody give the guy a paintbrush.
Yeah, but give the guy a paintbrush. There you go.
That was the answer to World War II, and the Holocaust was give the guy a paintbrush. And I when I think about that, I think of so much in that. In your story was, you had the advertising job, you're climbing the corporate ladder, but if you're not doing what you're called to do, Jeff Goins writes about this in another ironic called the Art of Work.
Yes.
He writes about that. Like, if you're not doing what you're called to do, depression is a very likely outcome of that.
Absolutely. It's inevitable. And I think a lot of people who are feeling depressed and overwhelmed with anxiety, even if it's just anxiety or stress, it's because we know, if we really get honest, that we were made for something more. And I lived, 2.5 decades stuck in that vortex. But, not to be philosophical about the Hitler thing, but I think what's really interesting is he did choose fear. And perhaps that's what happened and led to open. And we have two choices at all times. And I talk about in my book, I even quote Stephen's quote from that book about fear can be a barometer, and we use it and we push through. And so I had fear. It wasn't like my life became instantly amazing. I knew I was going to be a writer and everything was made perfect. No, I had lots of fear once I decided I need to leave corporate. Once I realized, oh my gosh, I'm going to actually step forward in my dream. Fear gets louder, but it's about really having the courage to step in the face of fear. And I think it takes a lot of courage to follow our passion and to live our purpose, but it's the most rewarding. Once you start doing it, it's like building muscles. You build your faith muscles, and it becomes joyful, and you get strong, and you get happy.
Yeah. He says, I remember the exact quote. I've actually written a blog post about this. He says, fear tells us what we were meant to do.
Yeah.
That's it's a spiritual thing in the sense of, when you are, fear doesn't jump out, and whatever one's personal beliefs are, fear, the devil, whatever it is, like, doesn't jump out when you're like sitting on the couch watching reruns of Seinfeld. Right. It doesn't jump out. Like, nobody.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm
it's
not
when you're
scared.
writing a book or like taking that action. And that's a beautiful thing. It becomes a dance though. And you start to really get comfortable with the fear in the sense that you use it as a barometer. So I love that.
Yeah. Tells us what we're meant to do. So take us, you tear up the prescription. You're at that door to Walgreens or wherever it was, and you turn around. And, I'm imagining that the depression didn't just suddenly lift because you're still in those dark days. Describe that process of coming out of those dark days.
Thank you. And that's what's really, I think, misconceiving to people. We see people who look like they so-called made it, and it's like, it looks like an overnight fix. Not at all. I absolutely realized, well, I'm going to go home, and one thing I can do is one step at a time. I looked at my house and my closet. It was full of stuff. And so I started to remove stuff that didn't work. And I said, what I really want is to move back to Portland, Oregon, where I grew up. I really want to get a dog. I had wanted a dog for so long. And I was denying myself simple life pleasures because I had reasons like, you work in advertising, you know, sometimes 14, 18-hour days, you can't have a dog. We have excuses and reasons. And I said, why not? So I went and I adopted a dog. That changed everything. People who follow my blog, Play with the World, know about Tucker. He's awesome. And then I moved back to Portland and I started to carve out a sense of Shannon, like me matters time. Started to carve out things that were important to me. And I looked at all the blocks. And as I removed the blocks, such as you can't make money doing what you love. What is it you love? I didn't know I wanted to be a writer until I started to write. I started to travel and I started to find my purpose in taking small actions daily. And in those actions, I got more confident. And then I started to get clarity, like, wow, I want to write a book. And I wrote my first book, Find Your Happy. And that was amazing. It became an Amazon bestseller. And so through that process, I discovered, oh my gosh, I'm a writer. I'm a coach. I'm going to help people find their happiness too, because I have found my happiness. And I think it becomes a process. So it's one day at a time, taking guided, loving action. And that's what I experienced.
That's awesome. So I want to touch on one of the things that you write about in the book. And I'm going to quote you here. You say, I began to understand that there are dreams and goals that sat quietly inside my heart, but I had been too, and this is the key word, too distracted to hear them, or too afraid to acknowledge them and pursue them. So the obvious question that jumps out at me there is, what was distracting you?
Yes. The shoulds of what we should do. Like I should,
yes.
I know that's a whole chapter. Don't should on yourself. We do, right? We should do this. It was the shoulds of, I have put myself through graduate program to be in advertising. I need to stay in this career. Doesn't matter how miserable it makes me. I am making my parents proud because I'm in a career. I have a man that I'm dating who wants to marry me. Like that's an outward pinnacle of success. So it was all of the confines of the world and what they say I should do in order to be happy. And I did all of them, every single one. And none of them, there was a missing feeling. And it was because I wasn't allowing myself to be who I really am in the world. And so those dreams that tucked in my heart, for example, when I was a child, I was bullied a lot just because we moved. And I turned to writing. I would write poetry. I would sit out on recess and like write, you know, kids made fun of me, but I would write my poems. I'd go out in nature after school. And then I got away from writing. And so this writing, purpose of putting my feelings into words was part of me. And so anybody who feels struggle, like tough, in a tough place in their position in life, I always say, return, we know what we want. And they say, no, I don't. Well, return to when you were at your best self as a child and free and no inhibitions. What were you doing? And we sometimes find we were cooking or we were serving and helping grandma do something, and it brought us immense joy. So whatever brings you joy, that's part of who you are in your essence. And the world comes in worlds. And that's what happened. I was whirling. And so I had to let go of all that and say, who are you? Go do that. Be that.
Yeah. You know, I think when I talk to people, I talk about like finding that kind of that childlike nature in you again. Some people have this picture and they think I'm referring to the part where it's like, well, when you're a child, you slept till 9. When you're a child, you didn't really have any responsibilities. When you're a child, you like watched 6 hours of television a day and played video games. And no, I'm actually referring to like what I experienced and what most people experience when they actually think about it. And that's, they spend a lot of time creating. You know, I have often said, like, I believe we're all naturally like born entrepreneurs in the sense that when we're a kid, you know, when we're 8 years old, 7 years old, and there's a problem in the world, our default reaction is, I can fix that. Like, I can do something about that. I don't know how. I've got like some dental floss. I'm like, we're all MacGyver when we're 7 years old. I've got dental floss, 72 cents, and some leftover string, and I'm going to solve the problem of like the neighborhood pothole. I don't know how, but I'm going to do it. And we have that. And then somehow along the way, like sometime between, for some people it's at the age of 6, some people it's more gradual. I don't know. Some people it's a defining moment. They say, yep, I know when it was, December 3rd, 1982. And other people it's like, I don't know when it happened, but we lose that childlike, you know, like I can do that. I'm the solution to the problem mentality. And so I just want to clarify for people I know, because my mind goes there. When you're talking about like recapturing the things that we loved as a child, we're not talking about the sitting around doing nothing all day part of childhood that we sometimes experience. We're talking about the creating side and the actual accomplishing things. And like, when your parents put your artwork up on the refrigerator because you created this amazing masterpiece. That's the side we gotta rediscover.
Embrace. Yeah. And I think what you nailed it really is about the curiosity, and that's the key. So as children, we're curious, and it's about the joy. I'm talking about, yeah, exactly, the joy in doing what you love. So as a child, you said it best. You said, I don't know how I'm going to do that. But there's a mentality as a child of, I don't know how, but I'm going to find a way. And as adults, we often say, I don't know how I'm going to leave the job I hate, but I'll just stay in the job I hate. Yeah. Or I don't know how I'm going to overcome this tough situation. And then we let the excuses and the reasons and justifications kind of stop us. And that's why I actually wrote Adventures for Your Soul, because I've identified 21 habits that we do as adults that stop us from kind of reaching that overarching other side, reaching that dream. And it really does, as Elizabeth Gilbert says, if you're struggling to find your purpose or passion, turn to curiosity. Just let your curiosity guide you. And just like a child, there's no outcome. They're not saying, I need to have it figured out. They're actually in the process of creating, and the joyful curiosity, the adventure of it. That's really what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, the fun when you're a kid is not knowing the answer. It's just, it's discovering.
Living,
I mean, like
exploring,
just today. So let me think, about 2.5 hours ago, 3 hours ago, I was down in our basement painting with our daughter. And, of course, I've got my, I got to have a plan. So my plan is I'm going to start with yellow. I'm going to create a sunset. So from yellow to purple.
Of course,
we have the black trees that are in the background. Like I got to have I've got it all planned out. The only thing I didn't plan out was I tried to do a canoe and it ended up a rock. Now it's actually a great looking rock. It's a beautiful rock. I just started out as a canoe. She's just like, Dad, I want some blue. What are you going to do with the blue? I have no idea. I'm just going to put some blue. I'm going to put some blue down. And she's just like blue. And like, hey, there's a lake. Her lake is in the middle of the painting. My lake is where it belongs from a perspective, but she's 4, and it's a beautiful thing. She created something beautiful.
Yeah. And what's, I love, there's a key piece to that. You guys did it together too. And I think sometimes sharing your joy with others is a big piece. Sometimes when we are stepping out and we actually don't feel supported. And I think that it's so great that you can support her and be there. It's beautiful that you're creating together. That's what we all need to do with our, children and those little ones, but also with our own self. We need to nurture that creativity and share that support. I think it's important. Yeah. So find powerful people who can lift you up is key.
And it's fun, and it's amazing what it does for me. My wife Tara talks about how I'm a dude, and dudes don't naturally gravitate towards making handmade cards. But years ago, this is before we had kids, and I haven't done this in forever, but she got me on making cards. And we would literally, I remember in the Great Flood of 2010 in Nashville, this is the flood where, if you watch the news back then, there was one of those, mobile homes floating down the interstate. It was like a 3rd grade classroom or something, Well, it rained all weekend. So what did we do? We literally, our entire living room was covered with card making stuff. Yes. I still haven't used all those cards that I made. Oh yeah,
that's so fun.
And it was amazing, what it was doing for my brain, just exercising that creativity. Yeah.
I think you nailed it. It's really about, and I do life coaching, and I work with a lot of clients, and we identify your values. And it really comes back to, everyone has a core value of wanting to express themselves, and most often express themselves creatively. By humans, by default, we definitely, creative isn't always painting. It's not always writing. It could be cooking. It could be sharing yourself through comedy. I think that's the key, to allow us to set time aside to do that. There was a flood that forced you to stay inside and do that, but you spent time this morning doing that. And I think we have to cultivate a sense of awareness to kind of schedule in self-care time. And that's really part of the happiness journey, no matter how depressed or happy you are. It's the whole spectrum.
If it doesn't get calendared, it doesn't get done. And I think
because we get so busy.
We'll go down that tangent, but you got to make that a priority. I have to make that a priority, because the reason that was it wasn't a priority today, I didn't plan on painting. It was because my wife, who is, has a 4-week-old son and is a 4-year-old daughter, needs some her time. So she went to get her hair cut. And I'm, it's just me and my daughter, and Giovanni's
And you had
asleep.
fun.
So it's like, well, what are we gonna do? Well, let's go. She's like,
I love his name, Giovanni.
Sure.
That's
we have.
so great.
I ended up with two kind of well, one's actually more of a Hispanic name. Araceli is our daughter, and Giovanni is our son.
Beautiful.
But everybody thinks
so
they're both Italian.
I love it. I love how it just rolls off your tongue. So
yeah, it's fun.
But
it's fun.
It is. I think that's so nice. It's really about creating. So I would ask anybody who's listening, like, what makes you feel joyful? What do you like creating? Mm-hmm. Have fun with that. Go create. Do it. Do more. Follow your joy route. Follow your joy route.
Well, speaking of that, let's talk about that. What is the joy route? And I guess I know the answer to this, but what is it, and is it different for everyone?
Absolutely. Yes. It's definitely different for everyone. So the joy route, as I talk about in my book, Adventures for Your Soul, I identify the 21 habits holding us back, such as we settle because we think it's the best we can get, or we let fear, dictate our future, or we, so many different reasons that we stop ourselves from moving forward, as we've talked about. But then I have a joyful approach to fix each one, which I call the joy route. So the joy route ultimately is how I was able to step away from all that wasn't working, to remove fear from my life, to really step into a powerful place of happiness and follow my heart, living my purpose. And that means that you do what brings you joy daily. Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. And the thing is, we don't put expectations around our bliss. I didn't say, okay, that's it. I'm going to write and I'm going to become a world famous author. Even though now I love writing, and I say world famous because it would be amazing to touch as many people as possible. But all I said is I need to write. I'm going to write a blog today. And I wrote a blog, and that blog was while I was in Paris, and I sent it to Chicken Soup for the Soul. I followed the guidance. The joy route is about just doing what you love in the moment, and then you combine the nourishing, the nudge, which I have these nudges. My nudge said, send this blog to Chicken Soup, and I loved the stories in Chicken Soup, so I sent it. They were looking for positive posts, and they accepted it. And when I got that acceptance letter that said, you're a published writer, everything opened up. I had a feeling I had never felt before that was like, oh, skies parted. This is who you are. This is what you want to do with your life. And so it was one joyful step at a time. And the more we can cultivate joy, the more we can do joy, the more we can honor our joy, the happier we become. And here's the thing, what brings me joy might not bring you joy, but when you're truly living your joyful essence, just think about your daughter and your son, right? As they grow up, especially with parents. My parents did I love them so much because they really allowed me to do what brought me joy without saying, you can't do that, or that doesn't bring us joy. They said, you want to do dance classes? Okay. You want to try soccer now? Piano? They just pushed that on, let me be me. And the happier I became, the happier and prouder they became because I'm happy. And we do this on relationships or teachers or people around us. We say, well, I want to do this and you need to do this because it's going to make me happy. That's not really what it's about. It's about you honoring yourself and honoring everyone else where they are and their joy, because together we all become more joyful.
So you mentioned the Chicken Soup for the Soul thing. I mean, like you said, it was like, whoa, this was like, what did that do for you personally and professionally?
I'm sorry, you kind of cut out.
Oh, I said when you got accepted, when you actually
Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Yeah, by Chicken Soup for the Soul. What did that do for you personally and professionally?
Well, it was amazing. I remember because they pay, right? So it was my first ever. It was one of the first blog posts, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm a paid writer," because you have these fears of you can't make living writing and starving, writers. And I just totally disintegrated that belief by saying I'm going to be paid living writing. So what was really beautiful is I was paid for my story, and energetically that shifted something in me. And more importantly, what was really, really wonderful is that story came out in 2010 actually, right after I left corporate. So it was before I ever wrote any of my books. I had people who had reached out to me. So people would see the back, because they say about authors, and they said, wow, your story really touched me. I was in corporate too, or whatever. In that exchange, when I started getting emails from people, whoa, I was like, this is it. I'm actually helping people and sharing my voice and just being true to me, and I'm making a connection. And that connection is really what professionally made me realize I want to do this for a living forevermore. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, I think this is kind of a theme of the book. If I wouldn't say it's the theme, but it is a theme. And I love this because on the surface, where you were going with where you were writing this part, it kind of had like a selfish tune to it. But like I was just listening to Michael Hyatt, talk on his podcast today about how if my saw is not sharpened, if I'm not getting the sleep that I need, and I'm not, getting the good stuff in my life, I'm of no use to anybody else. And one thing that you wrote, and I think, this is kind of finding that inner world changer in people. You said, if one less person in the world was hurting, then that is making a difference in helping the world. And I would just point out that, like, I know that we all have those, we want to help as many people as possible. We want to help, tens of thousands. We want to be Mother Teresa. We want to be Steve Jobs or whoever. But like, if you're hurting, if you've got some deep, dark stuff going on, it starts with you, and it starts with you not hurting. And that in and of itself will make the world a better place. I just wonder if you had anything to add to that or expand upon that.
Yeah, thanks for that's actually one of my favorite lines in the book. And even when you read it, I just got goosebumps again because it's so powerful. I think when we start to get into our businesses and entrepreneurs, we start to really like more, how many followers, how many people, how many book sales, whatever. And that's totally, I say, put your mission over money or the masses, because the mission of wanting to help, it has to start with yourself. So I have a very, very powerful process of self-love and cultivating joy every day. I make sure I'm taking care of myself, because then I'm there for my clients. Then my books are better. Then all this interview is more grounded. And I think we all have to show up for ourselves first. In the first few years of my business, I spent so much time trying to help others. And I wasn't nearly as high of service as I could have been. I didn't discover the self-love piece until about 3 years into the business, when I said something still feels like it's missing. I'm happy. I'm going around helping people be happy. I'm lecturing in the world. And that's truly the inspiration for Adventures for Your Soul, because I was happy. I knew how to be happy, but I wasn't in love or happy with myself, my body, and kind of who I was. So it really becomes about self-awareness and taking care of yourself and truly knowing that you do belong. And I think that's a key piece. So a lot of times, there's a quote, if my dreams don't work, if I don't work, my dreams don't work. I always say, if your business doesn't work, you have to work for your business to work. And you also have to work for your dreams to work, or your family to work. You have to work first. So instead of being rude or mad or condescending to ourselves and say, oh, I have so many problems, I'm not doing it right, be compassionate, be kind of your own friend, and be kind to yourself, because that's in itself a breakthrough.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's important is, when you were on this journey, well, let me back up. I think that there's this myth that, like, okay, there's just going to be instant improvement. The switch is flipped, and that's not, sometimes it is that way, but it's not always that way. And one thing that you said, I chose to take the expectations out of my healing and instead turn to trusting that each action. So like, okay, today I took an action. It's not even today I took an action. It's right now I'm taking an action. And then 5 minutes from now I'm taking an action. And, it's kind of like you're running a marathon. Well, you got to get past the first mile, but even more so than the first mile, you got to cross the start line. And you say, so I instead turned to trusting that each action I took would indeed help me feel happier and healthy. And I just wanted to commend you for including that, because I think, we see this, this subject, or the title, and we say 21 ways to transform your habits and reach your full potential. And people are like, great, I'll get through number 1 and my life is going to be instantly transformed. And that's actually probably not the case. Again, it might be, but it's probably not. And so I just wanted to commend you for including that line in the book there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad you reiterated it, because a lot of people I work with some people too, and they're like, okay, when am I going to start seeing the results? When am I going to see fixed, right? Yeah. And it's like, and I always say, when you stop looking for it, and I know people hate that, because the truth is, for me, when I was so focused on when am I going to find my purpose, I couldn't find my purpose. When am I going to blah, 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 blah. And it's always outside of ourselves. And so when we actually turn our attention to the journey and recognize that, guess what? It's forevermore. We're on a journey of improvement, of healing, of health, happiness. It's called life. And so it's about embracing life and being fully connected in the process of it, just like a child who's connected to that curiosity. So thank you for really reiterating and reflecting that. That's important. I believe in all the work that I do, that I try to really want to make it joyful. But guess what? It's actually more beautiful that we don't have all the answers, because the answers, it's really what we really want as humans is to be in the learning and the exploration and the adventure for your soul.
It would be like, I mean, to me, it'd be like weighing yourself after your first workout and going, oh, I haven't lost any weight, or I've
That's
only
really what
lost
it
a
is.
quarter of a pound. I mean,
And then we get
yeah, because
derailed, and then we binge, or it's the same
yeah.
thing. Then we throw the book across the room and we say, this stuff doesn't work. But really, it's not. It's a daily action. It's about consistency and longevity, really.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. So another thing that you say in the book, and I agree with wholeheartedly now, but honestly, it's something I probably would have scoffed at like 10 years ago, and maybe have, I don't know. I probably would have said this in like a Stuart Smalley voice for those who don't know, you know, from Saturday Night Live. But you say that I learned that for each habit stopping us from reaching our full potential, there is a major emotional limiting belief at the root of it. So like,
Yes.
okay, that's what's stopping us. And it couldn't be that I was born here or I have, you know, like all these things. Each habit stopping us from reaching our full potential, there's a major emotional limiting belief at the root of it. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. I think you kind of touched on it too. A lot of times it's about taking full responsibility and being accountable for your life. And a lot of times specific things happen to us and we build up stories about the situation, and they limit us from moving forward. So I'll give you a really real world example. Right now, I'm actually on book tour for my book, Adventures for Your Soul. And about 5 or 6 months ago, I was sitting there talking to one of my friends, and I was like, I really want to do a book tour for this book, but I'm worried, terrified that no one's going to come to any of my events. I'm going to all these cities. I'm a 3-time best-selling author. It would hit pre-sales before it was released. But and I was like in my head, and I realized it was a fear from my past of a story. The first year I started doing coaching and writing, I started to do workshops. And one workshop very particular, I invested all this time and brochures. I wrote a press release and bought this beautiful boutique space. And I showed up and no one was there. No one. And it was like this beautiful course I was going to lead. And I was replaying that past experience and saying, you know, and that is an emotional belief that no one's going to come to my events that I had to let go of. And so far the book tour's been going amazing. And
Awesome.
what I realized is we're still in this. I'm writing the book about it, but I still had that fear come up and say, guess what? No one's going to come to your events because I hadn't forgiven or let go of the past. So that's what I mean by emotional barriers. And, you know, I think a lot of times we have to become self-aware and say, this is blocking me. And guess what? It's only a story and manifestation in my mind. And I knew that. And I said, well, I'm going to go on book tour anyways. And guess what? I'm just going to go and have a blast. And it's been going amazing. So we have to just honor the joy route in our heart. And that's what I mean by that.
So let's break that down real quick. So in your case, a part of your full potential is doing a book tour.
Yes.
And what was stopping you from doing that was that emotional limiting belief of what if nobody shows up?
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, I again, the workout analogy is probably a good one. It's like, well, if your beliefs say that you can't lose 75 pounds, but you work out really hard and eat right for 6 months and you lose 50, that's still a win for your health.
Yes.
You know, that's still a win for the way your brain's going to work, the way your organs are going to work. You are still statistically probably 10 times less likely to die of heart disease now. So, okay, maybe you can't weigh what that person weighs, and that is actually true. That might actually be true, but that doesn't mean that you can't be in better health. And I think that that's so true. I mean, I know I have seen that in my life. It's like, well, I can't get to this level with this exercise, meaning not necessarily literally a physical exercise, but I can't get to this level with something. So I'm just not going to do anything.
That's exactly
it.
And
holds
that's
me back
something
from
that
doing what
stops
I
us.
can do.
The emotional belief that stops us. And for example, that in that example you gave, it was comparing too. A lot of times we compare ourselves to others and it stops us because we're like, oh, they have what I want, their body size, their account money, you know. And I think it really does come back down to just really, like you said, looking at it, being aware of it, and shifting it to a more loving presence. And also the key is taking action. We have to take action. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna show up. I'm gonna do the best I can. And so for the person who's trying to lose weight or get their dream job or find their soulmate or, you know, whatever the goal is, for me, it was to have a book tour. And notice I didn't say successful book tour or like filled. I just said book tour. That to me is showing my full potential because I'm showing up as an author to my best. I've had 3 books and this is the first official book tour. It's kind of like a whole new thing, but it's so amazing to show up for ourselves. So the person who's lost 50 pounds, celebrate that. And guess what? It's a journey. The other, 25, 15 pounds, they'll come off when they're supposed to, or they won't. It's about the journey. So that is really the magic of the whole power of living your full potential. So again, I do want to reiterate potential. A lot of times people are asking, well, does that mean you're happy all the time? And potential really, I don't think has anything to do with happiness. I think it's about you knowing you're doing the best you can and in each moment showing up fully for yourself and your dreams.
I love that. I mean, I've run a couple of half marathons now, and the thing for me is like I'm never going to run a half marathon in less than an hour and 10 minutes. It's just not like that's never going to happen. I don't believe I do have the body type. Now, again, that's not a limiting belief. And B, I don't really feel like I'm ever going to put in the effort to doing that, But it's funny because for me, I remember when we were going to do the last one. And I just like, as we got towards the end, I think it was the first one. And I remember my wife was like, no, we need to do this. We need to do this. Like, let's just do the 10K. Cause I'm not going to really be able to do this very fast. And I ended up finishing, I mean, no exaggeration. I think I finished like 18 spots from last in my age division, like out of like 75 people.
But you finished.
I realized
and no comparison.
I finished, and 2, I did beat 17 people. So
yes, well, even more
no
because more out of your age range, right? Even more. I love that you got out there and did it, and I think I'm going to push back on you and say, don't ever say never, because you never know. I told someone a couple years ago, I said, I'm never going to write fiction. And she said, don't limit yourself. And, you may be like an hour, that's not a goal of mine, but at the time, and now I'm working on my first fiction book. Like you never know. Awesome. So just like allow yourself we hinder ourselves by the words we use, but I'm so happy that you're out there. I can picture you running with your wife and busting barriers.
It wasn't so much running with her as she was running in front of me, continuously looking back, and she would stop.
Come on. It's about showing up though, and you did.
There was one point about I think it was like the 11.5 mile mark, and I mean, I kid you not, I was basically running in place. Here we go, going along. I'm like 11-minute miles, which again at that time was good for me. That wouldn't be so.
That's really good.
I'm like, this is good, and then I'm like, we're doing great, and I hit about the 10-mile mark, and then suddenly it was like 14 minutes. 15 minutes. And literally at one point I'm like, I think I'm running still, but yet that I can still see that person.
It's such a beautiful metaphor for life.
I still haven't passed that car.
Yes. You have just showed like that we have seasons of our life too and seasons of our soul. And I think some people think once you start applying all the techniques, it's like happy all the time. I got it. I'm making millions of money, all that. But your marathon was actually like kind of a reflection of sometimes we go slower, but guess what? You kept going forward. I just pictured you chugging along, and that's really what it's about. Let's just chug along, keep going. In a nice way, like you're like, I think I'm moving forward. Guess what? We are. And so there's a lot of momentum in the forward motion, taking action, which you did.
My wife stopped and ate a sandwich, and
she's like, got a spa treatment. She's like,
it was hysterical. But anyway, so as we wrap up here, Shannon, you've written 3 books now, working on your 4th, your newest book, this, Adventures for Your Soul. It has 21 ways to transform your habits and reach your full potential. You've written 4 countless books. I think at least 4 times for the Chicken Soup series and probably others, magazines, blogs. But let's just say that hopefully many, many years from now, for whatever reason, you have 3 minutes to live and you're asked to share a message with the world. What would it be?
I have 3 minutes to live.
Yep.
I would make all my books free so everyone could have access to them and so everyone can get kind of what, but I would say right now where I am in my life, this message changes, but I'd say follow your joy route, because joy is the essence of why we're here.
So how do we know when we found that? How do we know when we found that joy route?
Yeah, we're no longer asking because we're living. And I think, and that may sound a little heady, but really, for example, as soon as I get off this call, I'm going to go hug my dog and give him the biggest loving pat. And that's my joy route. And then I'm going to go to my favorite juice bar and I'm going to get one of the smoothies I've been looking forward to all day. And it's like in the moment, I'm living joy and I'm doing what my soul wants for me. And it becomes an adventure of a lifetime. Every day is an adventure. And that's really what Adventures for Your Soul is about. So we know we found our joy route when we're being honest and true to ourselves.
That's awesome. So last question, Shannon, and this is the only question I ask every single guest. Everything else we do, we really try to tailor the questions, to the content and try to draw the best stuff that we can out of each guest. But the last question that I always ask everybody is, what do you want your legacy to be?
I'm working on my legacy now, which is all of this. I want people to know that they matter and that their dreams and they belong. So it all comes back down to cultivating a relationship with yourself of trust and awareness. So life can be an adventure for your soul. And it's everything we've talked about today is my legacy.
Well, I love that. Well, she has a new book out called Adventures for Your Soul, which I highly recommend that you go get it. She is empowering people to go on the adventures that they are called to live and to find their calling and to live their calling and to find their joy route. And she has overcome so many obstacles to do that. Shannon, you are a world changer. Thanks so much for being with us today.
It's so awesome being here. Thank you.
Okay, so Matt, can I make an observation?
I assume that's a rhetorical question.
Right. In almost every interview you do, you talk about this idea that when we're young, we see ourselves as the solution to the problem. But as we get older, we start to look outside ourselves for solutions. What did this interview with Shannon teach you about getting back to being the solutions to the problems we see?
Well, I mean, one of the themes that she expresses early on in the book, and that's why I asked her about it, is, this idea that it's our habits and it's our negative, limiting beliefs that we have that are usually holding us back from success. And the thing is, like 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds don't really have a lot of those limiting beliefs. They haven't been beaten down by the world yet. And, when I hear her talk about how it's your habits, that it's your beliefs that are responsible for where you are today. And I mean, that's not like that's a new concept. Jack Canfield talks about that in his book, The Success Principles. I've heard that in numerous places, but when she talks about that and think about that, she was, she had, as she says, she had an eating disorder. She was addicted, addicted to drugs. She was depressed, lifeless. And you go, okay, that's a result of habits. Like, no, it's got to be the result of a brain imbalance. That's got to be the result of that's got to be her parents' fault. That's got to be, that's society. That's too much television. That's whatever. But no, I mean, she took responsibility and said, no, this is my doing. This is my habits, my beliefs that have put me in this situation, and I'm not going to let that be the case anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important to realize that not only are we responsible for where we are in life, but we are also, responsible for being the solution to the problems we see. Mm-hmm. And so the mindset difference is, that difference between saying, I'm going to do this about it, and when is somebody going to do something about this? Go back and listen. I think it's like episode 3 with John Miller of QBQ. One of the things, he does this, the voice, of course, like, when is management going to do this? Management's never going to do what you want necessarily. And even if they do, why are you waiting on them? And so it's that mindset of taking responsibility and having the mindset that I am the solution to the problems that I see. There's a reason why, there's a reason why I'm passionate about it. It's one thing to see a problem in the world and go, that's not really something I'm passionate about. But if you see a problem in the world and it stirs something up inside of you, then that is something that you are responsible for solving. That doesn't mean you have to solve it by yourself, but you do have a responsibility to solving that. And I think of, even going back to, thousands of years ago to biblical times, I always think of the example of Moses. And the thing about Moses, if you know the story, Moses sees the Hebrew slaves being mistreated by the Egyptians, and he kills an Egyptian, runs off for 40 years, basically escapes the problem. And then God comes to him in the form of a burning bush and basically says, no, you're going to go back and you're going to tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Well, the thing was, God didn't have him go do this, that, or the other thing. He wasn't responsible for something that he wasn't passionate about. He was so passionate about the mistreatment of the Hebrew slaves that he killed an Egyptian over it. Like that's, they say in the heat of in the heat of passion. Well, he clearly was passionate about that.
Right.
And so I think that's a really good example that, he was responsible for what was, he took personal responsibility to say, okay, I've been entrusted with this responsibility. I'm going to go do something about it, rather than say, well, I'm passionate about this. And no, I'm just going to continue hanging out here for the next 40 years until I die. So I think it's biblical, if anybody needs that kind of verification, but I also think it's, I think it's spiritual in the aspect of when we're acting on the things that we're passionate about, that's when we're going to find the most joy and fulfillment.
Well, I think as you were talking, there was a couple of things that came to my mind. The first was, I was really impressed with her story as well. And one of the things that I thought of was the fact that just because we tell ourselves we're happy and just because we think we're happy and everybody else thinks we're happy doesn't mean we are. And I really appreciated that she really seemed to hone in on that at times, that, what really makes you happy? And, who cares what everybody else thinks makes you happy or what everybody else tells you should make you happy? And the second thing was, exactly what you were saying, that idea of taking responsibility. And as you were talking, I had the thought, and I'm pretty sure I could say this, even though I don't know that I could verify it with too many examples, but I don't think anybody's ever changed the world unless they took responsibility for themselves.
Good point.
You can't look at anybody and say, wow, they changed the world, but the whole time they're saying, no, it's not my fault. Even the people that are blaming somebody else for something, they took responsibility for addressing that issue. And, on both sides of any issue, it's people that care about it and are passionate about it that are the ones that are making a difference, good or bad. I mean, you look at Hitler. I mean, as bad as the guy was, he was passionate about what he believed in, and he took responsibility for it. He didn't wait for somebody else to do it. Now, I kind of wish he had, because maybe it wouldn't happen. But the fact of the matter remains that the only way you make an impact in the world, which is what this show is about, is by taking responsibility and being passionate about it. And I really loved how she really honed in on both of those. And I think you're right that was a great part of the interview.
Well, I mean, on the flip side of Hitler, to use him as an example, we talk about this in the interview, is, what he was truly passionate about was art. And, what, I don't know the exact story, but I think the gist of it is he was told by an instructor that he would never be an artist, that he wasn't good enough. And, if he had just said, you know what, no, I'm passionate about this. I'm not, your opinion doesn't matter to my success and my happiness. And he had gone on to continue to pursue art. I believe, with all my heart that at least much of World War II and certainly the Holocaust and all of the damage that was done. I mean, and somewhat of his legacy still lives today. And unfortunately in the hearts of some people, that wouldn't have existed. We would have had a guy who maybe there would be paintings in museums signed by a Hitler,
and people would like them.
And think about that, that name, that very name. I mean, it's become a verb. It's become an adjective. It's a disgusting word. Just saying that, I guarantee you, if people's, hearts were hooked up to, or their minds were hooked up to, monitors, there would be a reaction to just that word.
Yeah.
And how much different that would be. When I say Van Gogh, and you think of, Starry Night and Tranquility, and we think of, wow, that's really cool. When I say Beethoven, one of the first things that comes to mind is dun 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 dun. And we think of that. When I say Tchaikovsky, the first thing I think of is the 1812 Overture. And I think of the beauty, and I think of what that song meant to me when I was a kid. And it was the first classical music that I really liked. And listening to it in my grandmother's house and, pretending that I was a conductor. And like, when that word Tchaikovsky has meaning to me, just like Hitler has meaning to the entire world.
Right.
And that could have been completely different if he had just been taking responsibility for what he was passionate about.
Immediately, rather than changing what it was and going to something else.
Exactly. Yeah.
So in the interview, Shannon asked the question, what makes you feel joyful, and what do you like creating? So I want to ask those questions of you, Matt. What makes you feel joyful? And furthermore, how did you discover that, and how can others do that?
Well, one of the things we talked about in the interview was, going down to the basement and painting with our daughter Araceli. That's something that brings joy, to me. Just I get kind of the best of both worlds, in that I get to interact with her and see her creativity come out, but I also get to express my creativity. I get to paint, and I don't have any formal training in painting. I'm not very good at it, but it's fun. I like moving the brush, and I like seeing what it can produce, and I like messing up. I like turning a canoe into a rock, because I'm going to paint a canoe. That is not a canoe. Ooh, look, it's a good rock though. And I'll just tweak it out. That's actually a really good rock. And if you had thought that I intended to make a rock, you go, that's a really good rock. But it's a terrible canoe. It was a terrible canoe, even when it looked more like a canoe, I guess. That's something, creating art. I'm learning one of the things I'm learning to do right now is how to draw cartoons, and just sitting there, like the tranquility of just sitting there and creating something. On this blank piece of paper, there did not exist a cartoon. And now I have created a character who has a story. The thing is, you draw a cartoon character. That cartoon character has a story. Mm-hmm. Well, what's his story? Well, he was brought up, and, his parents left him. And so he went to the dark side, and he's an evil villain. And now he's just a crusty old villain. Like, every cartoon character has a story. Every piece of art has a story. So those are two things that really come to mind when I think of things that bring me joy. It's creating, it's allowing that artistic side of me to come out.
Mm-hmm. I think as I heard her ask that question, I really had to stop and ask myself, what makes me, joyful? What do I like creating? And I don't know that I have a real good handle on that yet, but I love the way that question makes me feel. I love the emotions that it brings out, just stopping and asking that, because we get so caught up in our lives asking questions that don't encourage us and don't make us feel good. But those questions, I just feel better when I'm asking them. And I think that's one of the reasons that she asks everybody to answer those questions, because it puts you in that frame of mind of, okay, well, maybe I don't know what makes me joyful, but I should go find out, or I don't know what I like to create, but let's go try some things and figure out what would be fun to create. And I think really,
I think you do. We've talked about some things that I think, we had for those who don't know, Mark and I work together, and we were just talking today, we're recording this on your daughter's birthday, mm-hmm. and you guys are going geocaching later.
We are, yes.
And that to me sounded like something that was, again, like painting with, my daughter, that's something you get to kind of the best of both worlds, because you get to exercise this part, the explorer inside of you. Mm-hmm. Every little boy is an explorer.
Yep.
And we're in our 30s now, but we still have that explorer inside of us.
Yeah.
And so you get to not only be an explorer, but you get to spend time with her. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that that's something that definitely is a source of joy. And I think, the key is, one of the things that, I got out of the book and got out of the interview is being intentional about that.
Right.
So you don't just happen to, we're not going to talk tomorrow and you're going to say, oh, I ended up going geocaching.
Right. Most likely not. Yeah.
It's what you do yesterday. I went geocaching. Well, how did you go geocaching? Well, I put it on my calendar. Mm-hmm. You're intentional about creating those moments of joy. So I don't think, I would push back to say that you do know, mm-hmm. Maybe you don't know all 10 things, but you know something. And now I think the next step for you is to be intentional about doing that thing more often. The next step for me is to, put time on my calendar, not to wait for Araceli to come and say, hey, do you want to go downstairs and make art? But to, okay, from 3 to 4 on whatever day, we're gonna make art and be intentional about it.
Well, and I think, that brings it full circle to what you talked about in the beginning, that, it's kids that as kids, they that's first and foremost in their mind. I'm going to do what makes me happy. I'm going to do what's fun, what makes me feel good. And as we get older, we forget that. Then we have to schedule it in because we don't think about it. But you're right. I mean, Brooklyn's the same way. She's the one that's saying, Dad, let's go treasure hunting. Dad, let's go do this, And, I think it really does come down to just being authentic to who you are, and it's funny that we had, Todd Henry before this, and we talk about your authentic voice. And now we're talking, about Shannon Kaiser. And I really think that just furthers that conversation about, what are you authentically? What do you really, really want to do? And I found a quote that really lined up with that. And it's from C.G. Jung, who says, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are."
Mm.
And I just love that. I love that idea of it being a privilege to be who you are. So is there anything that you want to talk about from the interview or about that quote that you want to address before we move on towards the end?
Yeah, I mean, I would just, one of the central themes is the importance of you being happy first.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've all heard it so many times. You can't change the world until you change yourself. You cannot have contagious happiness until you are happy yourself, until you are joyful yourself. You cannot impart wisdom on the world until you're wise yourself. I don't see many overweight, fitness trainers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see, not many skinny chefs, maybe there's a few, but, the reality is you have to be happier first. And I think, Michael Hyatt says it best. He says, that self-care is the most important thing, because if I'm not healthy, if I'm not happy, if I'm not rested, if I'm not sharpening my saw, then I cannot help a single other person do any of those things. And to realize, one of the things that we talked about in the interview was that idea of, if you change yourself, if you discover your the things, your joy centers, and you are happier, like that moment when she stood at the gates, the gates of hell. I mean, the doors of the pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
When she stood there and went, "No, I'm not going to take these antidepressants," that changed the world. That single act. And so when you create a happier you, a more joyful you, a more contagious you, that in and of itself, like if you did nothing else, you've already, done something to change the world. And that, to me, that is one of the most important lessons from this book and from this interview.
Well, and I think I just want to clarify. I know this is what you're saying, Matt, and I just want to voice it. We're not saying be selfish.
No.
But the key is, and I've heard this example a million times, you cannot give to somebody else what you don't have.
Exactly.
I can't give you, Matt, $5 if I don't have a $5 bill in my pocket. And so you can't make someone else happy, really happy, unless you are, and this goes into a whole different conversation about boundaries and everything else. But we all know people that, they at the expense of their own happiness make other people happy. Well, that doesn't work long term, and we're not talking about being selfish, but I think you're right. It is so important that you are okay with yourself to begin with. And if you're not, nothing else is going to matter. You're not going to be able to be happy. You're not going to make anybody else happy long term, because you're going to be miserable. And we all know miserable people make other people miserable. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Hurt people, as Rick Warren says.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, we want to give away a copy of this book, Adventures for Your Soul, from Shannon Kaiser. So if you would like to win a copy of the book, text adventure to 33444. Again, that's adventure to 33444 for your chance to win a free copy of Shannon Kaiser's book, Adventures for Your Soul. So before we get to the question, we want to thank a couple people who have left us ratings and reviews on iTunes. That would be your part.
Is that why it says Matt right there?
Am I supposed to say something?
All right, so make a note of that there. Whenever I just messed up. 22 and a half. All right.
Yep.
Yeah. Can you do that again? Do that again before we get to this week's question.
I most certainly could. Hold on, I got to get my screen right there. Okay. But before we get to this week's question, let's thank a few more people who have left us ratings and reviews on iTunes.
Yeah, so I want to give a shout out to Pi House. I believe that is the number pi, the Greek letter pi, not a house of pie. If it is the house of pie, as in pie that I would eat, I would like to know who that is. And if you can send me some pie, that'd be great. DIY Bailey, Nate Musson, Woodlands Community Church, Rick Zulo, and Matthew Hinman. Thank you to all of you for your ratings and reviews. And just a quick note, I love what Rick Zulo says. Well, actually, I'm sorry, Pie House, the House of Pie, says, this last part says, just elevated to what I listen to what I listen to when I shower status. I'm not really sure what to make of that, but the word elevated thing, like if he had said, I moved this to what I listen to when I shower status, I'm not sure what that would mean. But since he or she said I elevated it to, and I will take that as the highest form of praise I can get from that listener. Yes. So thank you very much.
That made me laugh too. I couldn't, it made me chuckle. I did the same thing. I'm like, must be a compliment. That's good. And then I wanted to know, what do I listen to when I'm in the shower? That was my next question. So anyways, if you have not left us a rating and review, you can find the link to leave a review on the show notes page at mattmcwilliams.com/092. And once again, if you want to be entered to win a free copy of the book, Adventures for Your Soul, 21 Ways to Transform and Reach Your Full Potential. I left out words there. I'm like, wait a second. That's not the title. Okay. Wherever we're at there. Jeez, this is not a good day to record, apparently. And again, if you would like to be entered to win a free copy of the book, Adventures for Your Soul, 21 Ways to Transform Your Habits and Reach Your Full Potential by our guest, Shannon Kaiser, text adventure to 33444. Again, that's the word adventure to 33444. And now for today's question, it is... I'm serious. Matt needs to turn on his microphone or we're not going to know what he's saying, but I'm making you edit these. That's what I'm going to do. Because you're like adding all this time to it. Okay.
This is what, okay, I'll answer this week's question is, what makes you joyful? And I will answer that by saying this, doing this. Anyway, go ahead.
Messing up Mark while he's talking. You just wait till the next time we record. And now for today's question, what makes you joyful? Head on over to mattmcwilliams.com/092 to answer that question, as well as to get the links to everything we've talked about today and the unedited video cast of Matt's interview. On next week's episode, we're going to talk about something that is all too prevalent in today's society, burnout, and how to overcome it. Take a listen to this clip.
Well done there, by the way. Okay.
Until next week, remember, you were born to change the world. You were born to make history. You were born to reach your full potential. So believe it, become it, and pass it on. I'm just going to, next time we do this, I'm just going to pull a Ron Burgundy and I'm just going to read whatever you put on the screen.
Yeah. So believe it, become it, and pass it on? Anyway.
Wait to do this. Announce winner. Wait, what? Thanks, guys.
All right. That was funny. All right. We'll see you next time, guys.